On today's episode of eCommentary, we are joined by somebody extremely special to myself and my performance marketing journey. If you've worked in performance marketing or ever ran a Facebook ad, the chances are you've probably landed on Jon Loomer's website. Jon is an OG of Facebook advertising who constantly maintains the status as somebody you go to for the latest news on Facebook. Jon, it is such a pleasure to have you on this show.
It's awesome to be here, Andy. Thanks so much.
I'm just so excited. I mean, when I started with Facebook advertising, it was almost like the amount of information that you were giving away for free was absolutely incredible. It was like a course in itself. And through the years, whenever we've had client questions that got a little bit difficult, a quick Google search on a client call, and usually one of your articles pops up and we had the answer, and it was always reliable. So thank you so much personally, but also thank you on behalf of the performance marketers listening to the call today. This has also kind of brought us full circle to where we are today and today's episode of the podcast, because I listened to one of your podcast episodes that was talking all about the risks of the increase or surrendering of control to automation on the marketing platforms. And in business, there's a saying that what you can automate, and what you can't, then you've got to try to figure out how to automate. But it kind of poses the question about, would you and should you trust an algorithm 100% with your money? And this is essentially what we're being asked to do with the innovation of Performance Max and most recently Meta's Advantage suite. The real dangers with it are the more control you surrender, and also the lack of transparency and the actual way that they're establishing the metrics that you're seeing. It also gets super challenging. The video views, like, they basically control the categorization of what a video view is. Did someone actually watch the video? Were they engaged with the video? There's no kind of, there's no reveal on that. It's just someone watched your video. Someone watched this video for 3 seconds. Okay, was it in feed? Were they scrolling through? Was that video running while they're reading a post above it? Like, what is it? And they're also kind of murkying the water with that, which makes it, a little bit challenging.
Yeah, so I mean, or whether it's autoplay video, we don't really know whether someone watched it because they wanted to, whether it automatically played in their feed, whether they played it with sound, whether they clicked to play. Now, there are breakdowns for those things that, of course, are buried, and I'm sure most people aren't using. But ultimately, those things might be important to you, but they're not necessarily important to Facebook, right? So if you're optimizing for a video play, they're not going to say, oh, these are the quality video plays that happen because they clicked to play it. They turned on the sound to make sure that they're listening to what you were saying. Whatever. It's like, no, these are just we're going to optimize for video play, and we're going to give them to you. So it's that kind of toying with metrics, but it's also like, was it 3 seconds in some because they've watched it multiple times, or was it continuous? We don't know that either. And there's just so many questions. But it seems to be a lot of this is related to some of the automations they're doing, where it's like, okay, we're going to turn this thing on, but we're not going to tell you how much it was used. So, whether it's, expanding your audience or using some of these dynamic creative things, they all have very similar names that I couldn't even tell you now. All these optimizations that are happening with your creatives, like, this is going to happen on a person by person basis. They might see it, they might not see it. We're not going to tell you really whether it worked. You kind of have to guess, and that's really been the most difficult part about this, I guess, transition we're in right now.
Yeah, and I think one of the dangers with the Advantage suite is that the platform is actually forcing the agency partners they're recommending that the agency partners use these tools. So as part of the agency partners program, one of the main criteria in that program is qualified spend, the within placement. So It's
Mhm.
the qualified spend has to be spend using best practices, which is the Advantage suite, so
Right.
that if you want access to the support within platform, you have to use these tools with like a high percentage of your qualifying spend, which again is, if it's working, it's incredible, but it also
Right.
puts you in a difficult position because you know that, a high spend account that maybe could optimize slightly by, excluding some of these placements. If you want direct access to a rep, or you want, direct access to support, you kind of have to go with the program. I think it's a challenge.
Yeah, unfortunately. And I think the Advantage Plus placements is a really good example. I mean, really the primary time it makes sense to use Advantage Plus placements is when the algorithm can't really screw up. And that's when you're optimizing for a purchase, right? So it could be either just a general purchase or optimizing for value. And if a placement isn't working, Facebook should stop spending your money in that placement, or as much of your money in that placement. The problem is how Facebook defines reaching your goals. Is that they basically define that for you by your optimization. So if you optimize for a link click or a landing page view, what we've seen for years now is whenever anyone gets a refund, the reason for the refund almost always is because of click fraud from Audience Network, right? And so that should tell you something, that Audience Network is problematic. So yeah, you got your money back, but what happened in the meantime? So basically what happens with your ad set, if you're optimized for a link click or landing page view, anyone who's not familiar with Audience Network, basically it's you're monetizing your app with ads. And so it's off of Facebook, it's on other people's apps. And a lot of times these apps or these ads may pop up when you don't expect it. You click on them accidentally, whatever. So the result is you can get a whole bunch of link clicks and landing page views from Audience, and it could be click fraud as well, people trying to monetize. You could get a whole bunch of clicks, but they could be accidental, they could be click fraud. They're almost always extremely low quality when they're just clicks from Audience Network. But Facebook sees you're getting what you want. So we're going to start spending a very high percentage of your budget on Audience Network. And you're going to, if you don't dig and you just say, wow, these are some amazing results. I am so happy I got all these link clicks. But the reality is I think most people actually care. It's not just you're getting link clicks. That what did they do on my website once they clicked? Did they do anything? Or did they immediately abandon? And that's the kind of the dividing line between what Facebook thinks you want and what you actually want. It's like, yes, you wanted that link click, but there's a reason you wanted that link click. There's an assumption. You drive them to your website that they're likely to do something else, or a percentage of those people would be likely to do something else. But the reality is, if it's accidental clicks and click fraud, whatnot, bots, whatever, they're not going to do that. And that's, one example of optimization gone wrong that, really concerns me.
We see this happening, but what is it, why do you think that the platforms are pushing so much for automation?
For a new advertiser, I understand it. It's almost like, where we had this separation between the boost button and Power Editor / Ads Manager for all those years. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Their features, they don't have as much customization, but it's like it's overwhelming. There's so many options. Like, what should they do? Facebook knows best. At least a starting point. Boosting makes sense for those people, but eventually you should, want to customize your advertising a little bit. I understand it from that point of view, but now, they got rid of Power Editor. Now the boost button, they try to give you more and more some of the features of Ads Manager, but now it's like they're scaling back Ads Manager as far as what you can do. Again, I think it has to do with, I think the motivation there for Facebook is there are too many advertisers who are over customizing but shouldn't be. And and it's impacting their results. And I get that, but we're seeing too often now that we're going in a direction that, yes, you have a default, but you can't even change it. And that's my biggest issue with it, because this isn't just the new advertisers anymore they're applying to, because their bottom line is they want to make sure you get good results, and I think they were concerned, at least this is my assumption, they were concerned that advertisers were getting worse results than they should have because of some of the settings that they were using.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you have to believe that the platform wants you to succeed. You like deep down, you have to believe that. Otherwise, you're not going to spend your money there. But on the flip side, you've also got to kind of have the thought that they're also a business that have to answer to shareholders, and their, revenue for these businesses is driven by ad spend. So if surrendering control gives people better results so they put more money into the platform, that's one case, and I can understand it for the beginner. But also for the more experienced media buyer, surely there should be some removal of some of the restrictions, like how many ads active you can have in an account. Why are you governing how many pieces of creative I can put out? If we take it to traditional print and I want to spend as much money as I can on different pieces of creative, like as long as I can get the placements, I'm okay. But it just feels like they're making it too easy for everybody, and that's where it's almost like you get a 7 out of 10 instead of being able to get a 10.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I really struggle with understanding what they've done since the iOS 14 changes, because I understood, I guess, that it kind of caught them off guard a year ago. It's a year ago now, right? It's all just a blur. When all this went down, that, it seemed like they only had a few months to prepare, because it was out of their hands. It was more of like an Apple thing. So I get it if that impacted their development and their adjustments going, for like most of 2021 or whatever. But what baffles me is that there are so many things that they could do that have nothing to do with the Pixel that would presumably improve Facebook ads results, so optimization and targeting. But it doesn't appear to be any consideration for Facebook. So like, for example, all the iOS stuff is only related to you send people to your website. People opt out of being tracked on your website, whatnot. There's so many things, individual things that someone does within the Facebook app that Facebook tracks that could be used for optimization and targeting, but aren't. And that could improve those results. So like, for example, you could optimize for, whether people actually like high quality engagement. Like what we know, and Facebook knows, what high quality engagement looks like. It's not someone spamming your comments. It's not someone who does the angry emotion reaction because they hate seeing your ad. It's the people who share your post. It's the people who probably hit the love reaction on your post. It's the people who have an actual productive comment on your post. So the ability to optimize for quality engagement, which may cost more, which I would think would be better for Facebook too, potentially, and better for the advertiser, but also to be able to target that as well. So like we can, yes, generally target people who have engaged with any post or ad, or have engaged with their page, and there's just these buckets within page engagement that we can target. But again, not a quality, like we can't target people based on the specific post that they engaged with, or target people who only shared our stuff in the past. Like that would seem really valuable. Like these are the people who are pushing our brand, or based on the frequency of times that they've done this before. So like Facebook has all this information that you'd think could be used for good for the advertiser, and it's not part of our toolbox. And meanwhile, we're supposed to sit back and like go broad, just trust the algorithm, and Facebook will find what they think that we want. But the reality is that's not what we want. But we can't tell Facebook exactly what we want because they don't allow us to define what quality looks like. Quality is never a consideration.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that there's probably a lot of theories on that. I mean, I think, first of all, they're less inclined to do something about the spam and fake accounts and scams and things like that because they can use that for advertising, right? Those are the people, ultimately, who do a lot of this stuff that leads to engagement and clicks. I mean, there's just a lot of that low-quality stuff out there. But that doesn't really add up for me though either. So I really have a hard time explaining it myself. Like the example that we talked about with Audience Network and the fact that Facebook know that low quality clicks come out of that. I mean, the amount of refunds they've given us over the years, they know. So why can't we define what high quality traffic looks like so that doesn't happen? Right? Like their answer was to come out with a landing page view, which is 3 seconds. Like that's not helpful. Like, for example, I've got custom pixel events on my website for at least a 30-second time on page. We can go up to 60 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever. Also for scroll depth, people who have clicked multiple links, gone to multiple pages of my website. Those are all custom events. Like, why aren't there standard events for that? So then you could say, no, I don't just want a click. And yeah, I don't have a big conversion in mind of like someone signing up for something or buying something, but I actually want them to spend some time on my website. That's what I want. That's my definition of success, not you show me a column of results and say, see, we got you all these clicks. That's what you wanted. That's not what I wanted. I would think that if you had the option of optimizing for quality clicks, quality traffic, and link clicks being cheap, quality clicks being more expensive, that would benefit everybody involved. So answering why, I don't really know. Like some of this stuff to me just seems like it would not only make so much sense for the advertiser, but for Facebook in terms of making money. So don't completely get it.
No, and it's so interesting to see like the developments that are going on with other platforms. So like TikTok, one of the metrics that we love is that they give you when people are clicking on the video view as a metric. Like this is just like it for creating better creative. When you see that click point, you're like, that's where they're really captured. That's our that's where our hook sinks in. And again, like Facebook have all of this data and more, but they've never used it. And my hope is that they're forced to adapt because of what TikTok are currently doing with their advertising and the data that they're giving. If you're getting this quality there, they kind of have to do it eventually. But they should have done it before. They were first. They were first here.
Right. Yeah, and I mean that's kind of the way Facebook's done things for the most part. Is they won't do something until someone else does it, and they do it to a point that everyone's talking about them and everyone's moving to that direction, and then they feel like they have to copy it. I mean, even ads managers, I think pulling a lot from Google. Like you said, it doesn't really add up in that they've got all the data. It's not like they've suddenly got to start collecting information they hadn't before. And they've got a team of developers and whatnot, I'm sure would love to build some of these tools. They just don't. And I'm not sure why.
Yeah. And I think that leads quite nicely onto something that I got in trouble with the Advantage Plus suite, and that was the Advantage Plus Creative. I had an account that we're working on who are super tight on brand and branded assets. So everything is beautifully laid out. They spend a fortune on their creative. We uploaded it. They give us all the formats we need. And I missed that button that customizes and applies enhancements. And I got a I got a frantic Slack message in the evening
Oh man.
saying, "What have you done with our assets?" And I had no idea. So it was only when I went through and kind of worked back that I could see, oh, there's this button that I hadn't seen before that was checked, and it had overlaid text. It had, enhanced the image. It had retouched this photographer's work that they paid a fortune for. And it kind of got me thinking, like, is it a little bit arrogant that Meta assumes it knows more about the type of assets for your brand that'll work than maybe your brand managers or the creative team behind a brand? Like, what's your thoughts on the Advantage Creative Suite?
Well, yeah. First of all, how confusing can we get? Not only do they have a bunch of features that have similar names and just some kind of features that cross between them, but they keep rebranding and changing them. So that was what you're referring to is originally Dynamic Experiences, I believe, and then Advantage Plus Creative, and then but it's also you see Standard Enhancements as being kind of the pull-in for it, and so essentially how that and this is what I'm sure even your client doesn't understand. In a way, it might not be that terrible depending on how it's used, but we don't know how much it's used. So basically, you turn it on, and they can make these potentially subtle, like the way they describe it, it's all really subtle enhancements, right? It's things like the brightness and the contrast and aspect ratio, depending on the placement and things like that. But also things related to the text. So the optimized text per person is where that pulls into this, where whatever you use for headline description and primary text, they can switch them around. But this is all based on a person by person basis. So it's not just like you submitted this image. We don't think that's good enough. We're going to enhance it for everybody. That would be easier to track and to fix. I'm guessing what happened with the client is that they saw it in their feed. They were one of the people where Facebook decided you should see this enhanced version. Lucky you, right? You should see this lucky version. They saw it and freaked out. The reality is they might have been the only ones who saw that version. They probably weren't. But the way it works, they might have been, and we don't know how many people saw it. We don't know how much they're customizing from person to person. And we don't know the impact of that optimization, whether it led to better results or worse. And that's where you just kind of put the trust in Facebook's hands. And yeah, is it arrogant? Absolutely. But it's not like arrogant. It's like they don't give you the result. The only way to determine whether or not it worked, according to Facebook, like there's no breakdown for it or anything, is do a split test. That's it. You do a split test when you turn it on and when you turn it off. That's how you know whether it worked. You still don't know how much they optimized and tweaked and whatnot. But it's this whole black box era that we're in with Facebook that it's complicated and it's frustrating.
Yeah, and I think, we both talked about it before the podcast. Like, I'm someone who's done incredibly well out of, Facebook and Instagram and advertising on the platform. So it's not that I'm super critical of the company. Actually, I probably owe a lot to them in terms of, they've put food on the table for my family, which is, through their platform and what I could do with advertising. Like, I'm super grateful. But a part of me just questions, like, why is that feature automatically enabled? If you're going to adjust my asset, surely I should say, do you know what? I choose to do this rather than I have to choose for you not to do it.
Right. And actually it just came out the other day that the optimized text per person is now on by default, which to me is crazy. It's like, I don't understand how primary text and headline are anywhere close to being the same type of things that should be swapped. I just like, what are the situations where they're swapped? And I would love to see what the results are when they're swapped. But it's yes, we're seeing that. I mean, honestly, right now we're in this, especially when you like to have control over things, we're definitely in this time where you just got to be extra vigilant and careful that, because a lot of these features that are turned on, you have to hover to see whether it's enabled or not. Like, or is it checked? Is it whatever? And to decide, like, is this something you want? And as we keep saying, the problem is, though, it's like, okay, experiment with it, turn it on, but we just don't know. We don't know whether it's working, other than comparing it to what our results were last week. But we don't know if that's why. I mean, that's really bad logic, right? Oh, this week our results were better. I also had this turned on. That must be why. We don't know. It could have been any other factor as far as why our results were what they were. And we're left guessing, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think I always used to feel like I had an answer for most things within the platform. So when
Yeah.
a client asked me something, I would usually be able to say, yeah, it's because of this, or it's because of that. But now I'm finding myself in a position where I'm saying, I don't know. And I don't know, not only do I not know, but I don't know if I can find the answer for you because I don't know if that information is available.
Yeah.
Which, I've been working on Facebook ads for years. Like I would like to think that I read a lot, I study, like I work with it daily, but I don't have those answers.
I mean, I don't know is a really good answer. And anyone who thinks they truly know in a lot of these situations is probably lying to you. But it is difficult because it was much much easier to explain how things worked when it was more transparent. And also when it was done logically, right? I mean, I go back all the way back to, because I was always a Facebook apologist, because I thought I understood really how everything was working and why it was better than what people wanted or what they were complaining about or whatever. I mean, ever since, like, going way back, the rollout of the news feed. It's like, why was the news feed done the way it was? Because it's now a fire hose of information, because there's so many people on Facebook now, back then, and you wouldn't want to just scroll through and read everything because there's just too much. And Facebook's going to prioritize the stuff that is most engaging, that they think people care about the most. How do they know people care about the most? Because they have that information. They know what they click on and whatnot. So it all made sense. But, and not to really kind of go off topic here, but I think that was the start of all of this, right? Is of trusting Facebook, knowing what we wanted, and just allowing them to do it. Back then, I thought it made sense. But then, like when pages and their pages started complaining, business started complaining because their reach dropped. And then they started that was big, because then they started figuring out what allowed them to reach more people. Right? So they started to figure out that algorithm, and they started to game that algorithm. They started to see was huge weaknesses in the algorithm. It wasn't just the stuff that people cared about, it's the stuff that manipulated you. And then Facebook came out with those reactions, right? And it's like the reactions help bucket people's emotion so they could use that. But now, how do you use that? It's just been, and this all goes back to like our issues with misinformation and the types of content that people are using now to build their brand, that leverages the algorithm. And I know we're talking about advertising, but it's all kind of connected, that Facebook's just been really bad at this stuff. And now we need to trust it and give them our money. And it's getting tougher and tougher to do that.
Yeah, I just think that the growth of TikTok is almost like a shining light for Facebook and Instagram, because I think that it's going to force them to improve what they're doing. They have to, because this beast that's developing over with TikTok, with viral videos, now they're developing their advertising. It's going to start eating into their market share, and what Facebook probably has always needed is a competitor, you know, a direct competitor. Google's slightly different, I would always say, but something that's going to go head to head with it. And I just hope that it forces them to elevate at what they're doing, share more, think about how can we do it better, rather than how can we, you know, maybe take from a platform. Like how can we improve it? How can we use what we've got to deliver the best advertising experience for our consumers?
Well, and look, they've already been copying TikTok just generally. Just so much, whether it's reels or just, changing now the news feed structure a little bit to focus more on first it was stories and now it's reels and just videos, but also people and pages that you don't follow becoming a much bigger part of the newsfeed experience, kind of like with TikTok and the for you and whatnot. So I don't know. I think I guess it would help if I had a more positive view of TikTok generally. I don't. So what Facebook needs is a competitor or someone who is going to do things in a way that not only work and are profitable and are make them money and make advertisers money, but for the common good. It's done, in a way that doesn't manipulate people, and I don't even know where I'm going with that. But just all of these issues that we have with algorithmic news feeds right now, or put it better, all these issues that we have with content, with misinformation and manipulating elections and everything else, can come back to the algorithmic news feeds. Whether it's Facebook or elsewhere. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't know that TikTok, sure, TikTok might end up with some great features for advertisers that Facebook has to copy. I think that's just kind of along the long list of areas that Facebook needs to improve, though.
Can I ask you, I guess something a bit more personal, John, with over the years, have you found that the more you've worked with social media, the more you begin to understand it, but then the more you start to understand the dangers? Have you become slightly more disillusioned with social media as a mechanism?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, when I first became exposed to Facebook, 2007, I was obsessed with it, and I used it constantly, too much, and I was an open book. And especially with my friends, like that was great, right? So I don't have to worry about it being public. It's just for my friends, and I'll just say the most ridiculous stuff that no one really cared about. And then, over time, absolutely, I've first of all become more guarded in what I share, much less personal. But you also, because you understand how it works and you understand how algorithms work and what inspires action and whatnot, it really creates a barrier for me for just creating content, right? Because there's the one side of me, it's like, it doesn't matter. I don't like, and really the way I used to always look at it, it doesn't matter what the algorithm wants. I'm going to create this piece of content because this is what I'm feeling. This is the message I need to get across right now, right? But that over time, that doesn't really work very well for a business. And so it's that constant tug and pull that I'm dealing with. And then, from a personal standpoint, I mean, I really barely use social media personally now, and it's kind of a shame because that was really the whole point of social media, and why I fell in love with Facebook at the time was just being able to communicate with friends that I haven't communicated with in 20, 30 years or whatever. And to have them in this space, it was awesome. And then, and I guess it's completely different environment now.
Yeah, I mean, I got asked again. I think we're diving into something that's probably pretty interesting for people. We all work in marketing, like we're all into advertising. And I was asked at a party about, I've got a 1-year-old, and I got asked, like, would I be happy when she goes on TikTok or on Instagram in the future? And every part of me wanted to just be like, I don't know if I want her to go on it. But
Yeah.
then I kind of also need to, I know that she can't avoid being on it. So then I would need to teach her in the future how to actually operate in these platforms. Like, how does an advertiser get you to buy a product? Like I try to explain this to my partner. She's a shopaholic, and
Mm.
she's like, oh, how did they find me? Like, how did they do this? And I'm like, look, it's like this. And it was a bit like with the documentary with Cambridge Analytica. They were like, how did they manipulate an
Mm.
algorithm? How did they manipulate people, like society, with advertising? And I was like, actually, like fundamentally, it's quite simple with the retargeting and showing people the next piece of content based on
Right.
their views. And then there's a part of me that's like, we've got to teach our kids in the future, like what is real, what's fake, and then also that your self-worth isn't determined
Mm.
by likes, comments, and reactions on a social media platform. Your values are how you are in society. It's not how you are on social media. So that don't be don't think that because someone gets more likes than you that they're better than you. It's just that they know how to create a piece of content that gets a reaction.
Yeah, and look, I have three boys who've all kind of grown up through this era. So two are in college now, and one who just entered high school. So we dealt with this dilemma with them. It's like there was a certain age that, and all I always felt like our kids were the last ones to get a phone, but they didn't get a phone until they're 12, and then which was crazy to us, right? It's like you got a phone when you're 12. It's nuts. Um, but and then it's a matter of, well, the nice thing about these days is you have some control, right? So you can monitor their usage, establish some rules in terms of how they use the apps, and that's kind of the way we've done it. Now, the question of excuse me, um, you know, whether I almost wonder if the kids though have a better perspective of how everything works than we do. Yes, we have that life before social media and before these apps that we almost kind of wish the world was like. And then today to see that big drastic shift, they've grown up with it. So they understand it better than we do, honestly. Now, can they fall into the same holes where, yes, they get obsessed with it, they care too much about likes, they allow it to determine their self-worth, all that? Absolutely. But so can we.
Yeah.
Right? So honestly, what I've found, especially these days, especially once we got into, I think, Instagram and then Snapchat and then TikTok, it's so hard to keep up with all that stuff. I've got to the point where the kids know more about this stuff than I do, and I almost need to trust them more. But it's a completely different world, obviously, that they're growing up in. That they're going to be a big part of deciding where we go with it, and whether it's regulations or just like how would how they raise their kids with it. Like I think they're going to learn a lot from this period of time as well. It's just going to be really interesting to see it all evolve.
And kind of jumping on that topic of the future and sort of circling it right back into advertising, we're giving away less and less control, more and more control of our advertising campaigns. What's your prediction for where this is ultimately going to go? What is in store for the future of advertising?
Well, first of all, I've never been big about predictions, but I don't think that what we want matters, because it really is these algorithms that say, not to be all about the algorithms, but that determine this is the direction we're going. Because on Facebook, they made an algorithmic decision that certain types of content should be more important than others. Some of it may be based on what people are more likely to engage with. Some of it is extremely manipulative. and they're like, what is it that's going to get people really riled up? Right? So I remember when video first came to Facebook, and and autoplay, people hated it with a passion. They're like, how do we turn this crap off? And yet that's all we get now is autoplay video. It's not based on what we want. It's what the algorithms ultimately determine we should want, because it's this whole reward system, right? So the algorithm will determine that this is the stuff that gets seen the most. So we're going to be creating it more and more. We're going to get positive feedback for it because more and more people are going to see it and engage with it. And we're going to keep doing that. It's kind of this whole manipulation, unfortunately, that I'd like to say we have more control of than we do. Are we heading into the metaverse? I don't know. I'm still, the younger folks out there still tell me that the metaverse is going to be a thing. I guess I'll believe it when we get there, but I wish we had more control over where this is heading. I just don't think we do.
No, it's possibly a case of the future is probably already mapped out and we're on a path, and we'll get trained to like the content we need to like for that path to walk. And I think part of me is really excited about, what could happen in the future with advertising in the metaverse. I'm really, I love advertising, and I love working out the psychology of advertising. If it's slightly, designing pieces of content or creative that people are going to react in a certain way to, like I like the science. Mm-hmm. I like the science behind it. I like figuring that stuff out. So maybe I'm equally as guilty as the platforms for that kind of approach. But I think the thing that I really have a hard time with is, will we reach a point where for me to run an advertising campaign, I semi-decide the creative? I definitely decide the budget until maybe I get told I need to increase my budget. And then I maybe tell them an objective, and they just run with it, and they take over everything, and then I can look at some numbers to tell me, did it work, didn't it work? And then I don't have a single source of truth for that. That's the future that I'm, as an advertiser, like a purist. That's what kind of has me worried a little bit. And but I'm going to have to adapt to it. That's the future. If I want to be in this industry, I need to adapt to what the platforms do, and that's got to be the whole approach to it.
Yeah, I think the one area of concern for any advertiser should be more automation, fewer levers to pull. The less you are needed, right? Now, the good news is Facebook sucks at this stuff right now. So if there's ever a time where you can just they're even with AI, I'm sure you see ads for this like I do all day about AI creating ad copy and stuff like that, and it seems ridiculous, but that's apparently the direction we're heading as well. I mean, if we get to the point where ad copy and optimizations and all that is automated, I mean, what do we have left? Just let the system take it and get us all the results we want. I mean, that's again why I'm kind of confused by Facebook not taking some of these steps to help us get some of these quality actions that aren't a purchase, because that would help them in the long run be able to automate everything. It's like, you want these quality things, here you go. You can trust the algorithm because we're focusing only on these quality. You don't have to guess, what these people are doing after they click your links and whatnot. We know all these various things. These are quality actions. This was good for you. But since they're still really bad at it, at least for the time being, advertisers still have a job, right? And we've got a lot of customizations that we can do. We've got to manage these campaigns and see what's working, what's not, and how should we move the money, even though, again, that's something that Facebook says that they should be doing with campaign budget optimization and whatnot. But Yeah, I mean that's look, future of advertising for a brand could potentially be amazing in terms of just tell Facebook what you want to do, and you get amazing results. Now, there's a whole lot of trust that goes into that, and I hope Facebook gets way more transparent, because it's good for them unless they have something to hide. Which unfortunately the conspiracies start coming out more and more if that information keeps getting hidden. So
Yeah,
we'll
and
see. We'll see.
that poses the ultimate question. How, in a world where everything is automated with less control, how do Facebook or Google, how do they determine who wins and who loses? How do they determine that, and what's the benchmark from that? Because if everybody has access to the same sets of targeting, everybody has access to the same enhancements, and
That's a good point.
like, how do they determine who wins and who loses?
Right. I mean, right now it's easier because everyone's submitting a different ad, and not that ads of the future will all look the same, but if you're going to have an algorithm that ultimately generates copy and creative and everything, this is way out in the future. I hope. Then that's supposedly optimal. Then yeah, you would think that becomes more difficult for Facebook, and it probably even raises prices as well.
It'll just probably come down to who's got the biggest bank account, and it goes back to a traditional bidding war. And
Yeah.
if targeting's all automated, you get the best. Everybody gets the best targeting. It's who's got the biggest checkbook that's gonna win.
It eliminates all the fun from advertising. Like I love the experiments. I love doing things in ways that Facebook or the platform didn't intend, with creating ads and the targeting and whatnot. And I'll be sad to see all that kind of stuff go away if we end up in this more automated world of advertising.
Jon Loomer, it has been such a pleasure to take a deep dive into the world of automation. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show, and I think you've offered some incredible insights. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
It's been great. Been great being here, Andy. Thanks so much for inviting me, and definitely talk soon.
Yeah, I'll hold you to that.
All right.